Hello and welcome to Krakow, the historic former capital city of Poland and one of the great gems of European civilization. I've been here for a couple of weeks for a week-long family reunion and then also to soak up the culture of the area. And one of the most striking things when you come to Central and Eastern Europe is the immediate sense of safety and security and harmony in these cities. And of course, much of that, indeed probably most of it, comes from its cultural homogeneity, because all of the sociological and economic studies show that the more cultural and ethnic diversity there is in a region or in a neighborhood, the lower the sense of social trust, the lower the sense of security, and indeed the greater the deterioration of the civic spaces. Lack of civic engagement, even buildings begin to deteriorate. And what I've also found here actually is the sense of dynamism and energy here. You know, Central Eastern Europe used to be so depressing in the 80s and 90s when they were under the yoke of communism. Now the Polish economy is growing at 3.5%. Contrast that to the 0.5% growth in the UK. In fact, by 2030, they forecast that Poland's GDP will overtake that of the UK. Yet Poland has one of the lowest, if not the lowest, immigration rates in Europe. So why is that? Because we, of course, have been sold this idea that increased migration is fundamental for the economic growth of a country. Poland suggests something different to that. Indeed, if you look at areas like the Polish health service or hospitality, those jobs aren't filled by migrants. They're filled primarily by people from Poland and neighbouring regions. So that does pose a counterfactual model for the UK, perhaps. And along with all of that also, there's another aspect to life here that I think is fascinating for us, and that's the sense of beauty. You find here that the old, ugly, brutalist buildings are being refaced in 18th and 19th century new surfaces. They're rebuilding old buildings. They're making ugly 20th century buildings look like glorious palaces from the 18th and 19th centuries. And as we know, beauty is fundamental to a sense of harmony for both the city and for us as individuals. We get inspired and we feel better walking around beautiful spaces. And you know, we say just walking around this square, we certainly have beauty in evidence. There's a final really important aspect of life and culture here that is important to note, and that's the sense of pride, of patriotism and good manners and common decency that you see around here. And a large part of that is because these areas actually lost their freedoms. They lost their sense of national identity. They lost many vital parts of their culture. And what we're seeing is a rejuvenation of all of that. I mean, if you look behind me, for example, this is my grandmother's family townhouse in Krakow. That was requisitioned by the communists during the Cold War, and it became the headquarters for the Soviet Polish Friendship Society, completely anathema to everything that Poland stood for. My aunt was allowed to live on the top floor, but the rest of it was taken to essentially undermining all of Poland's national identity. And the first thing that the Poles and the Czechs and Hungarians and Romanians and Bulgarians did with the collapse of communism was restore their national symbols, restore their flags, their coats of arms, their orders and decorations, their national anthems. And it's only when you actually lose your freedoms and your sense of national identity that you realize how important they are. And the problem for us in the West is we have never, ever had those things truly threatened from outside. And so we've taken them so for granted that now, ironically, they're at greater risk than they have been ever before. And throughout the Cold War, Central and Eastern Europe looked towards Britain and the West for inspiration and salvation as bastions of liberty and a sense of national pride and purpose. Today, in the 21st century, I think many of us in Britain and the West think it's Central and Eastern Europe to which we should look for that same sense of inspiration and salvation and a restoration of pride, patriotism, and the belief in faith, family, and the nation. That's all for now. We'll see you next time. Thank you.